To the Genesis, okay? We're gonna go to the book of Genesis of Bill's life right here.
Yeah, so I'm a relationship coach for men, and I help men who are struggling in relationship, who are maybe been through divorce or breakup, and I'm here just to support them in finding love, and first and foremost for themselves, and so they can take that to their current relationship or maybe the one they're ready to find. But it's all starts with themselves, and I'm here to help support guys do that. I also host a podcast called Men on the Path to Love, and it's been a great journey, and I'm here to, I call it my love mission. I'm here to spread love, because what's good for guys is good for women. What's good for women and guys and everybody else, it's all good. And there's not a whole lot of differentiation between men and women as we may think, and so anything that I'm saying about men, it can certainly apply to women as well. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Like you're helping men find the path to love. Speaking of your podcast, what
Yeah.
does that name mean to you and what do you want it to mean to the men that tune in?
Well, kind of like I said, it's that path to love, because we're on a growth path. If you're willing to grow and mature and in terms of love in your life, then you're on that path. If you're open to feedback, open to growth and to learning and loving, and so being on that path, it could just be as simple as listening to the podcast. It could be taking steps to get therapy or coaching and things like that. But it's first, excuse me, it's first and foremost starting with that awareness, of where do I want to be in my life? And, where does love start? It starts with me. And how can I open my heart to receiving that love and to give that love as well? So
What do you
it's,
think are go ahead.
yeah. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what do you think then are some of the reasons why maybe men's hearts are closed off and they're struggling to reopen it to the women that they want to be loved by?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of reasons for that. One, and the first one is just how we've been conditioned and raised as men, that we have to be stoic, we have to be, we have to keep it all in. We don't share our feelings and things like that, because that's not what a man is supposed to do. So we're fighting against that, that conditioning and how society sees us as men. And that's getting better, and it has gotten better over time. And the other piece of that, Taryn, is how women can be and respond to men. And, and it's when they're getting all this, the way the women speak to the men in a way that makes them feel less than, or if they do share what they're feeling, then they get cut down for that. So, like, there's a no-win situation. So, when a man is in that situation, then he's going to shut down.
I've seen a lot of men struggle with that where they're trying to be more emotionally available.
Right.
But unfortunately, they've been, I don't want to use the word conditioned, but they've been maybe led down the path of you're only able to experience one emotion, and that's anger, right?
Well,
The
that
old
yeah,
joke.
yeah. Well, that's what we're allowed to have as a man. We're allowed to be angry. That's the one emotion we can show. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I hear that, I feel bad for the men out there because there's the spectrum of emotions are so much more than that. It's so much more vibrant and so much more loving. And you can see the ones that want to love really hard struggle because they have this like shield up. What if I
Right.
get hurt? What if I'm vulnerable? What if she thinks I'm weak? What if she doesn't view me as a man? Or maybe worse yet, what if my friends see me walking down the street, we're holding hands together and we're skipping up and down the block?
Yeah.
Are they going to look at me less than? do you see some men struggling with trying to maybe own that identity that I'm in love, I want to show it, who cares what other people think?
Yeah, the mantra is so what? So what people might think I'm this, that, and the third. It's like I'm with this person I love and I'm gonna skip. So what, right? But that's letting go of our ego. And it's really hard for us to do that. It's hard for women to do it. And and it's hard for a lot of women to be emotionally available as well. So it's focusing on yourself. What do you want? And how do you want to experience life? And do you want to experience it, you know, guarded and not really living, but you're just hiding from what's really inside you? Or do you want to just live your life, be you? And whatever that is, and you're a man, then that's a man. You know what I mean? It's how you are. It doesn't, you don't have to let society define how you are as a man.
Do you think some men are struggling to understand that they could be who they want to be and not necessarily give in what society, their culture, or even their peer group wants them to be?
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. Peer pressure is deep. I mean, you go all the way back to school, when your kids, your friends and peers would make fun of you and that kind of thing and call you out in front of other people. It all stems back to those kind of experiences. And so we learn from a very early age that, hey, man, we can't go there because I'm going to get laughed at or ridiculed or put down or, be seen as less than a man. So you see, that's what a lot of men are up against. It's that old, what society thinks. And, I try to raise my son and my grandson now is to just be you, man, and be okay with that. And yet, if you've been experienced that as an adult, all that stuff in your childhood, it's going to influence where you are as an adult and how you are in relationship. So it's not going to just happen overnight because you want to do it. That old paradigm, that old conditioning, that unconscious behavior is going to drive most of your behavior. So, what it is about is learning to override that unconscious behavior, bring the unconscious conscious, and then you behave from that space versus that automatic pilot, if that makes sense.
It does, and it leads me to an interview that I was watching, maybe I want to say last week, Bill,
Hmm.
and these were single men, but they were in and out of the dating scene, like a lot of men, maybe as we were younger, but the difference is that they were in their 40s doing this, so there was somewhat of a they needed to grow up a little bit more
Yeah.
to be nice, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it is that one person said that the only time you take a woman out to dinner is if you're hanging out with your friends and you want to make yourself look more attractive to your friend group. And I sat back and I thought about that. I was like, okay, that's an interesting take. And then the group of guys are talking a little bit more. And at the end of that interview, what I realized is that their behavior was performative because they were doing everything for their circle of friends.
Right.
And one guy said that he asked a question because he was a little bit younger than them. He was trying to learn because these are his mentors, quote unquote.
Hmm.
He asked the question, what about going, what about taking your girlfriend or your wife to a dinner, just the two of you? And Bill, they went, just the two of you? Why would you do that?
Like,
But they couldn't
what?
fathom just being romantic. And I shared that because this young man, he was so impressionable, like many probably young men at that age in their mid to late 20s
Oh, yeah.
who are maybe seeing guys that come across as successful because they have the jewelry, they have the fancy car, but maybe emotionally and spiritually and mentally they're bankrupt.
Yeah.
When men like you and I, or men who are like us, what action do we need to take to maybe combat that and or to be better examples and mentors to the next generation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I recently did an episode about more than a paycheck, that why being the provider isn't enough. And it's all good to be the provider and to have those expensive clothes, jewelry, all that cars, to impress. But that's just so surface. It's only going to take you but so far in terms of your emotional intelligence, and you can have all the provider you want to be, but that can't be it. So that and it's kind of going along with what you're saying about being, having all the bling and everything to be impressive, but you've got to work on the emotional connection. And if it's all performative, then you're going to perform in your relationship and you're not going to be real. You're not going to be authentic. And that's going to reveal itself at some point. And if you have to maintain that status or that perspective, of I'm this, that, and all, well, good luck because you're going to have to keep up in the ante to keep that going, and eventually it's going to crumble. It just there's no strong emotional foundation to keep the relationship going. Unless you have a gold digger who all she wants is the money, then who knows. But if we're talking real serious relationship here.
And I think that's the key. I think some people maybe, and I'm speaking to the men about this,
Hmm.
is that you raise a fantastic point. Being the provider, that's good. We
Yeah,
want to celebrate you for that.
sure.
It doesn't stop there. I
Exactly.
would argue, bro, that's probably just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way things are these days, men and women both have to work for the most part, and so you might as well work together as a team in terms of providing, taking some of the pressure and also, balancing out the give and take, and then come from that emotional, safety and creating that emotional safety and space that the relationship can grow with.
It's like that old internet joke, right? Where it says, I'd rather be 100% by myself and pay 100% of the bills than 50% with someone else and have to pay 50% of the bills. Right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
which one do you rather have? You rather have the relationship, the partner, and only 50% of the debt, or would you rather be alone than 100%? And some people truly believe that I can do bad all by myself, why do bad with another person. Um,
Well, that's a perspective, but if you're looking at it that way and you enter it that way, well, guess what you're going to get, you know?
yeah, and I think so many people they don't see that a lot of their own issues are because of
Hmm.
their own doing,
Yeah.
right? Instead of it's well, it's Bill, it's Terrain, it's Teresa, it's Jane. It's like, okay, yeah, they may have done bad things to you, but what role did you play? Well, I didn't play any role, Terrain. I'm God's gift to women.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're putting blame on everybody else and you don't look at yourself, guess what? You're going to keep repeating the same patterns over and over again and wonder either how did I get here? Which is my next podcast is about this, by the way. But it's how did I get here? Why do I keep in this same relationship? Or all women are like this. So, I'm angry at women. Well, no, man, it's like you got to look at your patterns and what you brought to the table, what went wrong. Have the courage to look at yourself and see your part in it. And it doesn't mean you take on the blame. It means that's where your life opens up again. That's where you get your power back is by seeing what you did and then do better next time. But if you're ignoring that, guess what? Your old patterns are going to determine who you're attracted to, who you're drawn to, how you show up in relationship when you're all stressed out. And all that stuff comes into play because you're just going with the same familiar energy versus looking at yourself and getting clear about you and then looking for what you really want instead of that going for that intensity, that draw, that attraction, that chemistry. That's powerful. Yet that's just maybe just the beginning, but you got to slow down and pause and really go for what's important to you, what matters to you in relationship, and that's your values. Because chemistry is great, but if you can't get along, Boy, I've been in that situation, man. Roller coaster, and it's like it's crazy making. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the impacts to men and women being who are suffering from the heartbreak from relationship after relationship after relationship, and they just can't figure what is going wrong?
Yeah. Well, if they can first and foremost, well, I'm gonna say first and foremost, have compassion for yourself, for how hard that is, and don't beat yourself up because it's not your fault. It's how you've been, how you didn't choose how you learned to love. You didn't choose how what comfort felt like in a relationship. You didn't choose what safety felt like or what familiarity is in a relationship. You didn't choose all that. That comes from your conditioning from early on in life. From how you mirrored, how your parents mirrored their behavior, or how you saw other people in relationship. All that forms how you step into relationship as an adult, not to mention any traumas that you've been through and things like that. So if you have the courage to take a look at that, look at your past, see how your past has influenced where you are today, and take responsibility for that, then that's where you're going to get your power back. And that's where you're going to see things change in terms of your next relationship because you've done the work yourself. And then you can take that and it's amazing. That draw can still be there, that attraction, that chemistry can still be there. It's familiar. But when you have that awareness, then you get to pause and say, okay, I'm going to act, I can accept that draw, but wait a minute, let me slow down. Is this what I'm going for? Or does this align with what matters to me, my values, what's important to me? So that's where you get your power back.
How can men establish their values and then cultivate it in a relationship in healthy ways?
Well, values clarification is an effort, man. I mean, I remember the first time I did it, it took me like 2 weeks, and there's all kinds of tools online for free for just Google values clarification or do it in ChatGPT, whatever. Um, there's it's so many ways to do it, but you really want to get like I have like a top five core values. But if even your top 10 values, let that guide your life. And that's why it takes so much time to do this. You don't want to just, oh, I'll do it in 5 minutes or an hour. You really want to take your time and get clear about what matters to you, what's important to you. And if you really get clear about what's important to you, then that's your guide. You don't let your thoughts, your feelings, your urges to determine your behavior. You go by those values. So get really clear about what they are. And, you might say, hey, I value, compassion in a relationship, and then you don't act compassionate. Well, then you don't value it. And that's the difference. We can have these ideals of how we want to be or how we think our values, but if we're not acting on them, then they're not really values. So that's how you determine what's a value. And if you're not adhering to that value, then you either have to say that that's not a value or you have to act accordingly. So that's the first step. And that's hard because most of us don't even think about that, right? We're just living from where we are. And to slow down and take the time to get really clear about what's important to you, then you may see that this pattern is changing now because I'm going for my values versus what's familiar to me, what's comfortable to me. And things will open up like you won't believe.
I remember doing something similar to that with a former partner of mine.
Hmm.
And this was years ago before my current one. And we went through it together, but separately. So we would go through it separately, then we'll come together and share what we found and then
Hmm.
continue down that path. And what she discovered about herself was surprising to her, but wasn't surprising to me, Bill.
Mm.
But she wanted to learn from it until it wasn't important anymore. And the reason
Mm.
why I say it wasn't important anymore is because life, as they say, started to life.
Life showed up.
Life showed up. I can't do it anymore. I got to go to work. I got to do this. I got to do that. And I continued on it because I was looking at it from the perspective I'm doing this work so I can be better for her. Let
Mm.
me rephrase that. I'm doing this so I can be better for me, which in turn is going to
Oh,
help me be better for her.
okay, got you.
Now, when I was pointing that out to her, she came up with, "Well, I got to do this. I got to do that." And then I gave her the explanation or the example. If you were in a relationship
Hmm.
and you wanted to show up for yourself, which is going to help you show up for another person, and that person ignored it, how would you feel? And then she was like, "Oh, yes, I would feel bad." I was like, "That's the way I'm looking at it." I'm like, "This is something that we're doing not only for ourselves, but to strengthen this. And you're finding reasons not to do it
Hmm.
and then justifying that reason." So eventually, a little while later, a couple months later, the relationship ended. Now, when she was living her life, everything that she was giving up, everything that she was focusing on and giving up, it reversed because now life took it away.
Mm.
She didn't have the same job anymore. She wasn't earning the same income.
Wow. Wow.
So last time I spoke to her, she shared that, and I thought to myself,
Hmm.
life has a way of humbling people,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes you may not like it because it may be a significant act of humbling, right? When you hear stories of people not taking the time maybe to work on themselves, but focus on other things, and then there's a sense of regret because they realize they've given up too much. How can we help people like that continue forward and maybe make a different decision in the future?
Yeah, well, it's always it's a cliche, but it's never too late, you know. I mean, I've been divorced 3 times and just celebrated my 17th anniversary with my wife. And and so that's what I mean. It's never too late to find the one, to find love. And just because this happened in the past, doesn't mean it's going to continue in the future. And it just means I got more work to do. And oftentimes these crises will happen, whether it's a breakup or something, lost the job, whatever, these crises will come up. And there are these blessings in disguise because it forces you to get out of that rut that you may have been in to wake up. And you may wake up the first time, you may wake up 2 or 3, 4 times later. It just depends how much you pay attention and how much you want to change as you move forward. And the thing I ask guys a lot is like, well, how is what you're doing working for you right now? Because otherwise, they wouldn't be here to see me, And so it's like, well, yeah, you want to change, but you can't keep doing the same thing you're doing. And that's kind of what I was hearing you say is like, yeah, well, I want to, I know I need to, but then I don't. Or I read all this stuff. Yeah, I know all that. Well, no, you know about it, but if you knew it, you'd be doing it. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I think some people will say that they know
Yeah.
when they really don't. Some people will say that they're going to do when they really won't.
Hmm.
It's like, I'm telling you this to shut up so we can move on. I don't have to hear about it until it hits the fan and they look around and that person is no longer there.
Yeah.
That's the part I think is such a sense of heartbreak because it's one thing if maybe someone said that I tried. I honestly gave an effort. It's another thing to say that I ignored. It's like your own body, right? Like when your body's in pain, I ignore, I ignore, I ignore it. And then when your body shouts and says, I'm in pain, get more sleep, eat better. You're like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to listen to it now because I can't walk.
Right. It takes that long, that big a crisis to happen in order for oh, well, maybe I should do something different. And yeah, and the heartbreak part too, Terrain, is that, well, if I had just made a few changes, maybe this could have worked out. And yet I is either afraid, and that's usually the case, like they're terrified to look at themselves, to make changes, men or women, doesn't matter. And so they'd rather stay in their comfort bubble than to expand and grow, to be better. And that's what makes me sad, because there's so much opportunity out here to grow. There's plenty of support and help out here. Just got
What
to
do
get.
you think the role of self-value, self-worth plays in someone having unhealthy relationships?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I went through, I had an abandonment issue, and, I've said this before when we were talking, but um, my parents got divorced when I was 6. I lived with my mom for a couple of years, and then she gave custody to my father at 8 years old, and then 5 years later, she died of a heart attack. I never saw her in between. And I'm saying all to say is that's what created an abandonment issue for me. And that carried on through all of my relationships from high school up until my first marriage, to where I overlapped relationships over and over. I always had to have someone. And that was because I was afraid to be alone. I was afraid of being abandoned. And so I would jump ship before would get, broken up with. And so I never had to go through that. And that was a protective mechanism for me, survival, and it's what I unconsciously grew up with an abandonment issue from my mom. And it wasn't until the second marriage, which I didn't overlap, and that's when the relationship ended. I'm in this huge house by myself with my dog on the living room floor, no furniture. After they all moved out, my wife, her 4 kids, and my kid, our kid together, I was alone for the first time in my life. And I'm just sobbing in the middle of my living room floor. And Terrain, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was finally alone. And I had to learn how to be okay with me, how to love me. And that's a work in progress, because we're not taught to love ourselves necessarily, and we're not taught self compassion. And that's where it really began with me, was learning self compassion, and that I'm worthy of that, that I'm worthy to, have that compassion for what I've been through. And it's not a pity party. It's not woe is me. Oh, I went through this, and therefore you should feel sorry for me. It's, man, that was hard. And that was some deep stuff you went through. And to acknowledge that and feel it, and then let that pass so it doesn't get stored up inside you, so that you can be free of that. And having that self compassion is better than self esteem. And it goes along with self worth. You're worthy of that as well for yourself. You may be very compassionate to other people, but if you're not compassionate to yourself, and that's what most of us do, we beat ourselves up over and over again instead of just loving ourselves and being okay with ourselves. And to me, that's where it all begins.
From that rock bottom moment,
Hmm.
and then you found the self-compassion, and then you started to bring yourself up. What did you do? What behaviors did you do after that to create the value, the worthiness within yourself?
Oh, it's just continuing to do the work. To I went through therapy. I was training in martial arts and learning, a lot of life's lessons can be learned in martial arts. And so that was part of it, learning meditation, getting different types of energy work, body work, all these things to really clear a lot of this old baggage that not only I was dealing with emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So, that was a lot of work, and it's still a work in progress, continues to do this work. And over time, it just, it happens. You just repeat over and over, keep growing, keep reinforcing the growth, and life just gets better, and your whole perspective on life gets better.
I like that you shared that you did the work as well as you found activities and things that you would enjoy. Because I know sometimes, and maybe you've experienced this with some of the people that you work with, where some people will isolate
Hmm.
and they'll stay in that misery, will stay within their thoughts, and they can't even trust their own thoughts because their thoughts are so self-sabotaging. Do you see that as well, where people get stuck in their own thoughts,
Oh
stuck in
yeah.
their own misery?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can't tell me how many men that they're addicted to gaming, and their only sense of community is the gaming community online. I mean, at least they have that, but they isolate, isolate, isolate. Between that, there's porn, there's scrolling, all this stuff that can be distractions. And next thing like, damn, like a year went by and I'm in the same place, because I don't have that, forward outlook. And when you can think of the future, I'm all about mindfulness and being in the now. But if you think about the future, what you envision your future to be and what you would like to manifest, then that gives you hope. That gives you something to work for. And what I try to encourage, I just had a client yesterday, this young man, 35 years old, and he's like, I'm ready to give up, man, because, went through a divorce and, his job changed and all these things. And kind of like we were saying earlier about these crises that happen, and they can be a catalyst for you to say, well, let me look at me. What do I want to do? Do I want to sit there being playing games all day or looking at porn all day or getting lost in doom scrolling, whatever? Or do I want to do something? And so again, it goes to looking at your values. What's important? What kind of activities can I get into? And what kind of support can I get to grow? And I think that's where it is. Yeah.
You mentioned the online community as some men get stuck in the
Hmm.
gaming, and you mentioned a year has gone by and it's like, oh my God, where did the time go? I'm still in my same socks and underwear. And it's been a full year, right?
Yeah,
Like, whoo,
right.
I need to go change. Have I showered? So sometimes when I hear these things, I think of those who have suicidal thoughts,
Yeah.
where they get the isolation. As we know, men suffer from this. Men suffer
Sure.
from depression, right? It's a big thing. How can we maybe, and you mentioned community, how can we as a community help to identify and strengthen the community around men who are suffering in this way?
Well, just paying attention, and if you see something and trust your gut, if you feel like somebody's slipping and going downhill, just let them know you're there. Hey, I'm here for you, man. Sometimes just knowing that there's someone that you can talk to makes all the difference. Because we get so caught up, and I've been through depression, excuse me, um, and I just felt like I was in the pit. I didn't want to look about anybody in the eye. I just wanted to check out. Never wanted to commit suicide. I just didn't want to face reality. And again, having the courage to step out of that and feel how hard it is to transition from a divorce, to transition from a career, taking a zero off your salary. These are things I went through all at the same time, and it feels like the end of the world. And when you isolate and that's all you're thinking about, then that can go on forever. And, you just stay there. And so having someone, I was fortunate enough, I was a single dad. I needed to do this for my daughter. I needed to be a better parent. I needed to know how to parent. And so going to therapy and then being in a group and getting feedback from others, that's really where the healing began for me, because being in a group, you're creating community there, and they're there to uplift you, support you, and you don't feel so alone in your life. And when you realize there's so many others out here going through what you're going through, and you think you're the only one, and all of a sudden the world opens up to you like, oh man, I thought it was just me. And, and I'm on this, it's a website called mensgroup.com. I'm a facilitator there. And that's an amazing place for men to go to get that kind of support. And there's all kinds of topics on, you name it, it's in there. And just having that ability or opportunity to say, hey, man, this is what I'm going through. And you have a bunch of guys going, yeah, well, yeah, me too. You're like, oh, I'm not alone. And then you see what these other guys are doing, and you're like, wow, this can be done. Let me get out of this. Let me stop this game and go take a shower and let's go live life, you know? Yeah.
I'm happy that you're raising awareness in that regard because I know sometimes men can feel very alone when it comes to handling these things.
Mhm.
There's like the pride of man, right? I have to be
Yeah.
strong. I can't go out and ask. Um,
Right.
if someone offers, I may listen, but I don't want to still come across as being vulnerable. How do you think vulnerability and maybe that pride aspect impacts men from finding the help that they desperately need?
It's big. It's huge. It's probably one of the biggest barriers because that ego, man, gets in the way. And, again, how's that working for you? But it's also understandable and in giving yourself grace if you're in that space and you may be, poo-pooing what I'm saying, but deep down inside knowing, yeah, I'd like to be able to do that. I just don't even have a clue how to get there. Just one step at a time, one little 1% of listening to a podcast or reading a book, reading an article, whatever, to start to shift how you think. And knowing that it's a scary thing to step out of your comfort zone, to out of that ego and what it means to in your mind to be a man. And so it can be terrifying to get out of that. So take little baby steps to start to do that. And my one of my things is do something out of your comfort zone every day. If you take a right to go to work, then take a left tomorrow, or whatever, something that's different, something that's just out of your comfort zone. And the more you do that, you'll get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so trying to take those steps to grow won't be as bad as you think.
Bill, let me ask you one final question, but I want to give you three wishes for this question, okay, my friend?
Okay.
What are three things you wish men knew about the benefits of a healthy, loving relationship and why?
Oh, wow. Okay. The benefits of a healthy relationship and why. Well, for me, I'll say in the relationship I'm in now, and I'll even say, the three divorces and other relationships I was in, I don't regret any of that because it brought me to where I am today. And as I mentioned earlier, and we keep saying, it's working on ourselves first and then taking that to a relationship. Well, I did all that. My wife, current wife, she did all that, and we met up, and here we are. Yet I see this as a continuation of my personal growth being in this relationship. I mean, it's hard to isolate or be by yourself. Yeah, you can do all that growth for yourself, but being in a relationship requires so much more. And so it's just a constant for me to, continue this love mission that I'm doing because all that I'm saying these guys to do and women to do, I'm doing it myself.